I want to tell you about a Sunday morning, 6:15, the kind of early that belongs to a man alone. Coffee not yet made, birds just starting. The particular quiet that I had spent 3 years building and had come to rely on the way some men rely on medication. And on this particular Sunday morning, there was a woman asleep in my bedroom. A good woman, a kind woman, a woman I had genuine feelings for and had spent a very good Saturday evening with. And standing in my kitchen at 6:15, I felt something I had not expected to feel. I wanted her to leave. Not because anything had gone wrong, not because I had changed my mind about her, and not because the evening had been anything other than what I had hoped, but because the morning was mine. The quiet was mine. The kitchen and the coffee and the birds and the particular rhythm of a Sunday that belonged to no one but me, all of that was mine. And her presence, kind as it was, warm as it was disrupting something I had not realized I was not willing to share. I am 72 years old. I live in Oregon. I spent 30 years as a land surveyor, a job that suited me because most of it was done alone, outside in early mornings and long silences, with nothing but the land and the instruments and the particular satisfaction of measuring things precisely. I was divorced at 58, not dramatically. My ex-wife and I had grown into people who were better apart than together. We handled it like adults. We are still civil. Our kids are fine. After the divorce, I spent 2 years figuring out how to live alone. And then I spent the next 12 years discovering that I was actually quite good at it. I had a life I had built entirely for myself, structured exactly how I wanted. My kitchen arranged my way, my mornings uninterrupted, my weekends accountable to no one, my bed occupied by only me, and occasionally a dog named Fletcher who passed away 2 years ago and who I still miss every single day. 12 years alone had taught me things about myself that 40 years with another person never could. I learned that I'm a man who needs the first hour of the morning to be completely silent, not quiet, silent. No television, no radio, no conversation, just coffee and the window and whatever thoughts arrive on their own schedule. I learned that I sleep better on the left side of the bed with no one on the right. Not because the right side holds bad memories, because it holds nothing. And nothing, after a certain age, can be a very peaceful thing. I learned that I eat dinner at 5:30 and that this is not negotiable, that I read before sleep and needed quiet to do so, that Sunday mornings are sacred in a way I cannot fully explain, but that I had stopped trying to explain to anyone because no one who had not built a life like mine could fully understand it. I had a life I had calibrated to myself completely. And at 70, I still had desire. Real desire. The kind that does not ask permission and does not check in with your age before deciding to show up. The desire was not a problem. I want to be clear about that. The desire was honest and human, and I had long since made peace with it. The problem, the thing nobody had told me about, was what happened when I acted on it. Her name was Linda, 67 years old. We met through a hiking group. She was sharp and funny, and she could keep pace on a trail better than men 10 years younger. I liked her immediately. We saw each other a few times over the summer. Easy company, no pressure, and the kind of thing that develops slowly and naturally between two people who are not in a hurry because they have both learned that hurrying is for people who have not yet figured out that most good things require patience. One Saturday in September, she came over for dinner. I cooked. It was a good evening, the kind that moves naturally from one thing to the next without anyone having to decide anything. And she stayed. The evening itself was everything I could have wanted. Two people finding each other after years of alone. Warmth, presence, the particular comfort of being close to another human being in a way that is both physical and not only physical. I fell asleep content, more content than I had been in a long time. And then I woke up at 6:15 and the contentment was gone. In its place was a very specific feeling that I did not have a name for at the time, but that I have since come to understand completely. It was the feeling of my life being in a configuration it was not designed for, like wearing a coat that fit perfectly last winter and discovering it has somehow become too small. Nothing wrong with the coat, nothing wrong with you, just wrong size, wrong fit, wrong morning. I stood in my kitchen and I looked at the closed bedroom door and I did a very quiet inventory. Did I still like Linda? Yes. Did I want to see her again? Yes. Was I glad the previous evening had happened? Completely. Did I want her in my house at 6:15 on a Sunday morning? No. And that no, that very clear, very honest, very unguilty no, was the thing I had not been prepared for. Because I had spent a long time thinking about desire, about what I wanted, about whether I still had the right to want things at 70, about whether my body was capable of what my mind was hoping for. I had thought through all of that. I had not thought through the morning after. I stood in a kitchen for a long time. Longer than it takes to make coffee. Longer than it takes to decide what to have for breakfast. I was trying to figure out what was happening inside me. Because what I was feeling did not match any of the stories I had told myself about the situation. I had told myself that what I wanted was connection, that I was lonely in a physical way, and that this was the answer to that. And I had been right. The evening had been the answer to that. But the morning was a different question. And I had not thought to prepare an answer for it. I thought about calling someone, my brother, a friend. But what would I say? Hey, I had a good evening and now I want the woman to leave, but she's still asleep and I feel guilty about wanting that and also confused about whether feeling guilty is even appropriate, given that I am 72 years old and ought to know myself well enough to not be surprised by my own kitchen at 6 in the morning. I did not call anyone. I made the coffee. I stood at the window. And I started paying attention to what I was actually feeling instead of what I thought I was supposed to be feeling. There is a difference, a significant, important, life-shaping difference between wanting intimacy and wanting a person in your life. At 25, these two things are often so tangled together that most men cannot tell them apart. You want her. You want her to stay. You want her to be there in the morning. It is all one thing. At 72, after 12 years of building a life alone, after learning every corner of your own rhythms and needs, these two things can be entirely separate. You can want the intimacy, genuinely, deeply, and without wanting the disruption that comes with it, without wanting the morning that follows. This is not selfishness. I want to say that clearly because the voice in your head will tell you it is. It is self-knowledge. it is the result of having lived long enough to understand precisely what you need and precisely what costs too much. The peace of a Sunday morning, the coffee, the birds, the uninterrupted quiet is not a small thing when you are 72. It is not a preference, it is a requirement. It is the fuel that makes the rest of the week possible. And a man who has spent 12 years learning that about himself is not wrong for wanting to protect it, even from someone he genuinely likes. Even the morning after something genuinely good, Linda eventually woke up. She was warm, easy. She made no demands on the morning. She had coffee with me and she left by 8 and she kissed me at the door and said she had a wonderful time. And I stood on the porch and watched her car disappear, and then I went back inside and the morning reassembled itself around me and I felt relief. Not relief that she was gone. Relief that my life was mine again. Relief that the configuration had returned to the one I had spent years calibrating. I saw Linda several more times after that. Each time I made sure she did not stay. Not because I did not want to see her, but because I had learned something important about the difference between what I wanted and what I needed the morning after. She eventually moved on, found someone who wanted more of the same things she wanted, someone whose mornings were not as carefully guarded as mine. I understood completely, and I was not devastated. I was honest with myself about why. I sat with it for a few weeks after, not grief exactly, more like an accounting, trying to understand what I actually wanted versus what I had assumed I wanted before I understood myself well enough to know the difference. What I wanted was the intimacy, the closeness, the warmth of another person, the feeling of being chosen by someone who did not have to choose me. All of that was real. All of that I still wanted. What I did not want was the architecture that usually comes with it. The shared calendar, the renegotiated mornings, the slow, well-intentioned erosion of a life that had been built with great care over 12 years of being alone. These are not incompatible desires if you're honest about them, with yourself first, and eventually, carefully, kindly, with whoever is on the other side of the situation. The problem is that most men never have that honest conversation, not because they are dishonest people, because they have not yet sat still long enough in their own kitchen at 6:15 to know what they're actually trying to say. The desire you feel is real. Act on it if the situation is right. You're allowed to. You have every right to want intimacy at 70 or 72 or 75. But before you act on it, before you let someone stay, before you hand over your Sunday morning, before you give someone access to the configuration you have spent years building, ask yourself the honest question, not, do I want this tonight? But, do I want this at 6:15 tomorrow morning? Because those are two different questions. And at our age, with the life we have built and the peace we've earned, the second question matters more than the first. Know the difference between desire and disruption. Know what you are willing to give and what you're not. And know your own Sunday mornings well enough to know when someone belongs in them and when they do not. That is not hardness. That is not selfishness. That is a man who knows himself. And a man who knows himself is the best thing a man our age can be. Reclaim your mornings. Reclaim the configuration of your days. Reclaim the right to want what you want without also being required to want everything that comes with it. You earn that right. Protect it accordingly. If this reached something in news, if you have stood in your own kitchen at 6 in the morning and felt something you did not have words for, subscribe to this channel. More of these conversations are coming. Hit the like button so other men like us can find this. And leave me a comment. Have you felt this? The gap between wanting the intimacy and wanting the morning that follows? Tell me. I am reading everyone.